Take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So something that I caught wind of that I wanted to pass along is Hila Klein, who is the wife of Ethan Klein. Together, they make up H3, which at this point I think mostly manifests itself as a podcast. They used to do videos and different kinds of content. And now I think they mostly focus on this H3 podcast. Hila doesn't seem to be in the podcast as much anymore, but she is increasingly a target of scrutiny. Both of them have been targets of scrutiny because of Ethan's positions on Israel-Palestine. These are long-held positions. Ethan has spent time in Israel. That's where he met Hila, who is from Israel. They got married in Israel, and her being from Israel means that she was enlisted in the military. By law, everybody who's there is enlisted in the military at 18. And so she served in the military, and that's what we're going to talk about here. But, in terms of these two as figures, I haven't covered it that much. I've brought Ethan up a couple times. To be honest, talking about him sucks. I don't really like it. I don't care for Ethan Klein. I don't have any type of interest in him as a figure. And to the extent that I have tried to extend any good faith toward him or whatever, it just doesn't seem to be worth it because he kind of discredits himself constantly. And at this point, there's really no point in trying to make the best out of whatever is coming out of his mouth. I have not kept up with his recent statements. There was an iDubbbz video that came out that was Content Cop. Oh, it's an old series. He brought it back to talk about Ethan. It's epic. I watched a little bit of that, thought about talking about it. I just don't have that much to say. I mean, I think most of it has been said when it comes to Ethan. He's not that interesting to me. And I think the only interesting take that he has, especially when it comes to politics, is this Israel-Palestine stuff. This is by far the most notoriety he's gotten for his political takes. And beyond this, I just don't think he has anything interesting to say at all. I don't think that his commentary on Israel-Palestine is very poignant or salient, but at least he, has gotten some attention on himself with those takes. But the downside is that it has caused this downward spiral of his career because he thought for some reason that wading into a left-wing space while holding, nuggets of this colonial ideology, he thought that was going to be a good idea or that wasn't going to be a deal breaker. And I just don't think that he predicted that something as catastrophic as what has taken place in Gaza post October 7th, and October 7th itself to a lesser extent, but certainly the response, has caused an undeniable torrent of information and images and videos that make it very clear that Israel is a genocidal regime. And that has always been the case, but it was much lower profile for the most part until the last just over a year. And, I think Ethan, when he got into left-wing politics, talking with Hassan, he did not think that this Israel-Palestine issue would be the wedge for him. But at this point, it's pretty much all he has to talk about. There's nothing else interesting about any of his takes. And so he is caught in this endless toxic echo chamber that, has ruined any semblance of credibility that he has. He made a video about Hassan. He refuses to talk to him about it, which is something that streamers and podcasters do that I just don't understand. They'll be like, I'll debate you. I don't care. And then they're like, okay, let's debate. I'm not going to debate you on your platform. We got to debate on my platform. And it's like, okay, fine. But then they're like, oh, well, here's the rules. And well, here's my rules. And it's ridiculous. And it just turns into this thing where everybody's like, Ethan doesn't want to debate Hassan because he's scared. It certainly looks that way. If you don't want it to look that way, if you want to resolve this to some extent, just go on the dude's platform and talk to him. But I think it's more profitable and it is safer for Ethan Klein in terms of his personal beliefs, his personal feelings, to avoid direct confrontation over these issues and continue just kind of putting things out. And so that, I mean, is kind of the extent to which I think there's anything interesting about Ethan Klein. So anyway, let me show this clip to illustrate a little bit more what I'm talking about. And then I'll give my thoughts on all of this. And I'm going to try to bounce away from talking about Hila and Ethan, because I think that there's, deeper subjects to get into here. But here is a clip of Hila talking about a specific time in her service where she was transferred from a boring desk job to something more exciting.
No, yeah, not really. But even if I walked with them to one house.
Okay.
I did get out of the car once, but surrounded with them. So.
Okay. Did they arrest anyone that night?
They did.
Did they bring it in the same car with you?
No.
Oh,
different car. There's a few cars going.
Damn, that's crazy. Was it how did you feel? Was it horrifying?
It was strange. Very, very weird.
How so?
I don't know. Just you see people in the house, and then it's like the soldiers just walk into the house and look through their shit and find guns, and the whole thing is really surreal.
They just do they knock, or they just like kick down a door and charge in?
I didn't really see that whole. I don't know exactly how that was.
Does it feel like a normal neighborhood? Or does it feel like, oh, this is scary?
No, it actually looked like a nice city.
That's strange. Yeah, I mean, from their perspective, it's so complicated.
Yeah.
So this clip is fascinating. I mean, it has it all. There's a longer version of this, too, that has more context. So I'll probably put a link to that in the description. But I think really the whole dynamic of between Ethan and Hila and the rest of this Israel-Palestine debate and the position that they've felt the need to take within this issue is all kind of right on display here. So Ethan is having a conversation with Hila where he's trying to get this information out of her about her military service. This probably is something that they have already talked about before, and he wanted to get her talking about it on the podcast. Something they probably regret doing. Doesn't really seem like Hila wants to talk about this, but she always comes off this way. She's kind of devoid of charisma. And so as she tells this story, there's just kind of this like dark heaviness to it that even they in the room don't seem to be able to ignore. And that's why Ethan gets a slightly squeamish at the end there. And he says, like, he almost says, well, from the perspective of the people whose house you raided, you guys are the terrorists. You are the occupying force that came in and busted down their door and did God knows what else. Hila says she didn't see that part. Believe that if you want to. But, he stops himself from saying, from their perspective, you're the terrorist, because this was actually just like a normal city. At the beginning, Ethan describes it as a terrorist city. He says, wasn't there a story where you went in with the IDF to a terrorist city? That's how he opens up this story. So that evokes a certain image right there. But then later he asks her, he says, what was it like? And she says it was actually a pretty nice city. It seemed like a nice place to live. Lovely people, really. And so that is what inspires him to say, from their perspective. But then he can't even finish that thought. He can't even finish the thought of what this might be like from their perspective. And so that's where he has to opt for, this whole thing is so complicated, right? And the way he looks at her, it's almost like he's, look, this guy's talking to his wife. He knew that this was illegal, an illegal operation. That was the whole point of this conversation that they were having. And so he seems on the edge of pointing that out to his wife, but he stops himself because he doesn't want to hurt her feelings. So that, I think, is fundamental to the dynamic of what's going on here. I don't want to give Ethan too much credit because, like I said, I think he discredits himself every day. But I think that he's at least a smart guy who said a lot of very dumb things. He's smart enough, right, to kind of navigate through a career this far in media. And I think that he even has said some empathetic things about this subject, or at least made an attempt to. He's also said a lot of hateful things about the subject and a lot of Islamophobic things about the subject. But he at least has that duality going on where sometimes in Ethan, I feel like I see him trying to be a good person. Not so much anymore. He's fully lost in the spiral now. But he has said some empathetic things in the past. Hila, I don't think she has any of those qualities. She seems pretty dumb. She seems kind of like empty of any moral compass. And those are the exact type of people that are most susceptible to military propaganda and to being conscripted into these type of illegal military missions. Any military in the world, if they're trying to do shit like this that's illegal, that most people know is illegal and extremely morally questionable, the people that they're going to try to get to do missions like that are people who are not going to think about it too much. People who are just excited to have something to do. They're excited to feel like they're a part of something and like they're doing something that makes them cool. And they get to, whatever, hold guns and shoot guns, and they'll just do what they're told as long as they get to be a part of that, like, cool kids club. So that's all I see from Hila here, and I don't think that there's that much going on behind the eyes there. So it really just makes her an interesting example, I think, of how this type of propaganda works. And Ethan and Hila have both become very interesting examples of how Israeli propaganda and Zionist propaganda works. And they repeat a fair bit of it themselves, but it's all in the framing, and it's all in who do you consider to be victims in any given situation? Who do you ascribe the word terrorist to? And how are you describing the power dynamic that's going on between these two people? And so what happens with, you know, somebody who is taking in the Israeli perspective, whether it's somebody who's from there or somebody whose family wanted them to go there for birthright or whatever it is, and so they kind of came up in that environment exposed to that type of propaganda, what they do is they constantly are describing Palestinians as terrorists. And whether that's resistance fighters who are taking some kind of military action, or kids throwing rocks, or civilians doing nothing in a hospital, or living in a city. By describing them as terrorists, you're instantly creating the justification for the military to go in. And it doesn't matter if they're actively doing something, because if they're terrorists, that means they have done something, so you better go in there and kill them. And then they use this sort of defensive framing. Everything about the IDF is phrased in terms of defense, the Israeli Defense Force. Most of what they're doing is offensive, most of it, because the people that they're fighting, for the most part, don't really have the military capacity to attack them constantly. And so almost all of what the IDF does is offensive. They're going into Gaza, they're pushing further into Gaza, they're clearing people's houses out, they're taking people's houses. In the case of the West Bank, the IDF facilitates settlers and things like that. But it's all framed in terms of defense, and that includes the military operation names like Operation Shield and Arrow, Operation Protective Edge. These are the type of phrases that they use for offensive military actions, and what that does is that creates the impression in the minds of the soldiers that what they're doing is justified because it's defensive. They don't have to think of it in terms of like, what did this person do? Why are we going in there and killing them? Is it right for us to take this land? All of that can be wiped from their mind because all they have to think about is the supposed victims of these people that they are going in and killing. So it's completely stunting their ability to view the people that they are victimizing as victims. And that is a big part of what we hear from Ethan and Hila, where even though sometimes they do recognize that Palestinians are victims, and the way that they do talk about Palestinians is recognizing that they've been treated incredibly unfairly and castigated and subjugated, Ethan Klein has acknowledged that. But the problem is that when it really comes down to it, when you're talking about the military action, the nuts and bolts that have created this dynamic that creates an increasingly receding ground that is considered Gaza and an increasing ground that is considered Israel, which is a country that wasn't there 80 years ago. When you're really talking about the military realities of what people in Gaza face, that sympathy, that empathy towards them as human beings goes out the window, because now you're talking about terrorists. And so it's a compartmentalization that happens on the part of anybody who wants to have half a heart, wants to have half a soul, and wants to consider themselves empathetic. They compartmentalize and they say, oh, well, the civilians over there, blah, 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 but they're being victimized by Hamas. And then there's these things that the IDF might do that are illegal in the cover of night, something that my own wife participated in. But hey, these things are complicated. And so aside from the fact that Ethan and Hila are, fairly useful parrots for Israeli propaganda, IDF propaganda, Zionist propaganda, I don't know, like I said, I just don't think there's that much value to following them. Me personally, I just don't think they're very interesting. I hear from plenty of people who are fans of them. It's not so much, because I don't think Ethan Klein has that many fans that are like actually left wing. Some might consider themselves progressives, or I think it's mostly like centrist types or people who aren't that tapped into politics. So there's limited value to talking about them at all. This thing about Hila participating in these like secretive IDF raids, even if it was only one, it probably wasn't just one, and it probably was worse than what we just heard there. But that is interesting. There's some substance to that, and I think really the most interesting thing about it is how people are desensitized, not just to propaganda, not just to what they see happening through a screen, but things that they physically are doing with their own guns in their own hands. And that is like the real, it's like a fundamental human issue. Every military on the earth does this. And there are plenty of militaries that are, tend to operate in a more defensive capacity than outwardly offensive. But for the most part, any military has to frame itself as the defensive posture in order to get people on board with the mission. And I think it's relevant to us in America, not just for the fact that our money is funding what the IDF is doing in Gaza, which is something that we should never lose sight of, but also the fact that we now have a president who is not only fully signing a blank check for Gaza and wants to like completely redevelop the land in, with US ownership, whatever the fuck he thinks the plan is there, but also he's threatening all kinds of military action. And Donald Trump and the Republican Party envision a US military that is far more violent and aggressive and colonial than even what we have seen in recent history, which could be described as all of those things. But Donald Trump wants more. He wants to make it worse. He wants a version of the US military that is even more aggressive than we have been historically. And so I think it's important for us to keep our eye on these strategies of military propaganda, especially when it comes to Israel. Everything that they're doing in Gaza, whether it comes to the bombs, tracking people with AI technology, using AI to supposedly suss out terrorists, really just finding family members and people that they want to kill, and using it for all sorts of targeting of their weapons and that sort of thing. All of that stuff is coming here and is already being done here, because a lot of it is outsourced to companies like Palantir, which already fancy themselves as the shadow government of America, and that's only going to get worse. We got 4 years of an even more rapidly expanding surveillance and military state under Donald Trump. And make no mistake that there are going to be many, many, many people who want to sign right up for that, or people who want to sign their kids right up for it. And depending on whether we can get a grip on the situation in America anytime soon, there are probably going to be at least 1 or 2 generations of kids who grow up with a heavy dose of American, super strength victim propaganda that is going to be aimed at desensitizing them against violent action against all sorts of people, whether it's immigrants, people who speak out for Palestine, anybody with brown skin, people in Greenland, people in Mexico, people in Canada, Canadians. I don't fucking know. These people who are running the show right now are fucking nuts. But the people just under them, the people a couple layers deep in the operation, they know to use the same propaganda that the IDF used to indoctrinate Hila and anyone else like her. on American citizens, and they're going to get started on that as soon as they can. We're going to be seeing lots of deals between America and Israel about, giving us the information that they have, giving us whatever types of tricks of the trade they've learned in terms of utilizing insane technology in warfare. And we're going to see that. We're already seeing it when it comes to rounding up immigrants, and we're going to continue seeing it. And so Hila Klein and her husband are interesting, if for no other reason than that they're good examples of how this propaganda is going to be flowing through Americans at every level of our society, probably very soon. So keep an eye on it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. It's the best way to support this channel. I'm posting all kinds of exclusive content there, like podcasts that don't make it to the main page, podcasts about more general things, book reviews, movie reviews, different stuff like that. I'm also dropping music early on there. I got an EP coming out called Dead Internet Theory. That's going to be out in the next week or so. You can hear that early as a member. Also, all the beats, if you like the beats in this podcast, all of that are posted there and more. If there's other stuff you'd like to hear as exclusive content, let me know and we'll work some things out.